Hey!
Yeah, I know. When we're having our landscaping done, they told us how much time it was going to take, but it still, in the moment, felt like it was just so long. Like every time you look out, I'm like, man, that feels like they haven't moved at all when they've done this. And all of a sudden, one day you come out and like half your yard's finished. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I gotta, I know that this isn't gonna be plugs for like landscaping, but I've been looking at a lot of the digital services too, because I'm really thinking about doing a massive re-landscaping job. This could easily become the garden chat. Because right now, I'm not joking around. Like, I've been thinking so much about doing something similar to what you've done, which is have my office outside. Have a special pod that's just my office, and then shrink my total gardening space down a little bit, just because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking about building a sound wall all around as well.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, building a big sound wall so that way we have a little bit more audio privacy, just so that way it's we're not getting any noise from like out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The service we used, and we had an amazing experience with them, was YardZen.
Oh, right on.
And it's a husband and wife. It's an interesting story. This couple, they live in Calistoga. So Napa County. And they started when they started the company, or when we moved into this house in 2019, Shanna found them, my wife found them. And we're like, hey, let's take a look at how they did it. And like I said, digital service. They ended up coming out to our place because we were only like, I don't know what client number we were, but they were about 6 months into like officially being a business. So they're like, you're nearby, so we'll come out. Do you mind if we come out and take some pictures and like check it out just to show you how we do all this type of stuff? We're like, yeah, of course, like that'd be fun, and got to be featured in some of their social media and things like that. And like that was kind of rad. But the reason it was so interesting about it is they were basically, what you do is when you contract with them, the price is super inexpensive. Like I'm so used to like garden centers that charge you for an architect like tens of thousands of dollars to design these things out, and the entire service was, I don't know what it is now, but I think we spent probably $1,500 for all of our yards.
That's not bad.
Done.
That's not bad.
And it was all digital, so they never had to come out. They didn't have to come out. They did for us just to like say hi and like meet the company sort of thing. But we basically sent them like my wife and I put together a Pinterest board of all these bookmarks of like stylistic things that we liked, just concepts. And so when we talked to them, we said, we had a phone interview with them, with the main person. They give you a project manager and a design architect. They give you a horticulturalist and like all these different people that work on your project, so that everything that's selected is selected for you and for the area that you live in and the types of plants that you should have and all of that. And so we just sent them our Pinterest board. Like, we had a conversation saying, this is generally what we like. Here's a Pinterest board with just concepts, just style ideas, color schemes, things. And then they came back with a first design. And then we could do for like no cost was like a set of revisions. Like, here's 10, 15 things we want to change. You could do more revisions, but you have to pay for it after that first one. But we did the first set of revisions because it was basically on point. And then what they delivered to us was like a PDF, a 13, 14-page PDF that was full-sized, like huge images, like kind of a three-dimensional style design of every part of the yard that they had designed. And then when they came out to do the project, they actually delivered, or when they came out to do the final, they actually gave us a physical book that was like this big book that we could open up and like look through everything. But even more so is when it was at the very end of the PDF was the topology diagram. So for the contractor to say, here's the actual scale grading, here's all the measurements for you, here's all the plumbing you need to have, here's all the, like everything you needed, they need to submit for permits to the permit office. They provided all the plant designs. So literally, here's the placement of all the plants, here's the exact species, here's a full listing of the species where you can get them, all of that, like all of that they just provided. And the service was, they don't do the contracting, like they don't do the installation at all, but they could introduce you to somebody who would, if you have your own person, or if you want to do it yourself. But they give you all of the designs. You could just hand to a contractor and say, please bid this out for me. And the contractor could just go bid it. And so the group that they introduced us to, we ended up going with because the owner of the company was amazing. We had a fantastic experience with this contractor. But yeah, the whole experience was awesome. Like, I loved going through that because they didn't have to come out. We never had to meet them in person, but we still got all of the context that we wanted to have. We get to pick and choose our plants. If we wanted to say these are all the plants we want, they'd give us guidance. But if we're like, just tell us what would be good for the area, here's generally what we like, then they'd pick stuff for you that they're like, their horticulturalist would say, this is what you should have in your area because of drought resistance and watering and the things that make sense for where you live. So it was,
right on.
dude, it was
That's
awesome.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Yeah, we're just at a point now where I'm trying to plan out a bunch of stuff. We have a lot of space here, and we're also like looking like post-pandemic.
Oh
Like
yeah.
what does the future look like where we could possibly start entertaining people too?
Oh, dude.
And so that's
Yes.
the other thing where it's like we're trying to think of how we have our inside spaces, our outside spaces. We want to be able to let the boys just run right outside, and right now, it's not as easy for us to do that because our grounds are like kind of expansive, and the boys could actually get hurt or get lost in certain things. Like we have this like set of fig trees that has just turned into a bramble. Again, for anyone that's joining the Kessel chat, we will be talking about Star Wars soon. If it helps, I can talk about fig trees as, I could liken it to the Maw, or I could talk about my soil content and figures of coaxial. So I mean, it's. It is one of those things where what I'm trying to do is get more Endor and less Tatooine back there.
There you go.
So
Nice.
yeah,
That's awesome. That's cool, dude. That's exciting stuff. It's fun stuff.
well, good deal. But good. Thanks for the recommendation.
Totally,
we've been looking at Yard Zen, and again, Jeff and I are not getting any type of sponsorship from Yard Zen, although we would happily take it.
Anything? Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, the experience. The last thing I'll say about it is the experience was amazing. Like I've recommended it to neighbors of ours a few different times. I don't know if anyone's used them, but I'm like, they made the process feel so simple, and they were super easy to work with. And when we said design elements, they're like, yeah, whatever, it's your design, so we'll lay it out however you want, and they'd give us some suggestions, and it just felt really good.
Right on. That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
so
really
we're
cool.
tonight on the Kessel chat. We are Rich. What's up, man? Rich is here.
Rich. Hey, the whole reason we got into this discussion was because in the last couple of days, Jeff knows this, some people know this, I've been dealing with all of these home problems that actually kept me from being able to, I've been dealing with contractors at my house of all types. I missed Rich's show on Sunday because of it. It has been days and days and days of having people open up walls, open up ceilings, and I'm not one of these lucky people that suddenly find like X-Men #1 somehow in the in their
wall of your
walls.
house.
Yeah. Although I will say, I went to a comic book dealer. There's 5 emerging comic book dealers here in town, and I was able to actually get some amazing comic books. Again, go to your local comic book store. I was put in contact with some amazing dealers, and I have some new additions to my collection.
Nice.
Some original X-Men that I had back when I was a kid.
That's
So
super
yeah,
cool.
it was a lot of fun.
Right on, dude.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, good time.
Rich did say that you should consider putting a Millennium Falcon in your backyard. I'm like, well, if you're gonna
100%.
dude, if you're gonna do that, I mean, with the size of your grounds, as you put it, the back 40, you might as well just make a scaled down version of Black Spire Outpost in your backyard. I mean, if the kids are gonna get lost anywhere, at least they can get lost in Batu.
Okay, so I am not joking around. When we launched this, this whole effort and looking at our backyard, it actually reminded me of when we bought the house. We brought a bunch of people over, and the house was really nice, but what everybody was like, oh my gosh, was the backyard. And it was because it was so big, but it was also because we had these old trees, like big, tall, old trees, some that are like 70 feet in the air, some that are 80 feet in the air, and it's just like unbelievable. And the first thing that someone said was, these trees are so big and old, you could really like build a set of platforms and like
Ewok Village.
Like
it
Ewok Village,
oh my
and
God.
like have a whole like rope, and then that's all my kids talk about. Whenever we talk about doing a tree house, they're like Ewok Village, and and so yeah. I just gotta go for it. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
So
it's like I can feel like Ewok Village or like one of the treetops in Kashyyyk, basically.
Yep.
Like
exactly.
Oh my gosh,
Yep.
that's awesome. That is so cool. And Gaurav is here too. Hey Gaurav, how you doing, man? Thanks for being here.
Gaurav, how you doing? Thanks for coming back.
Right on. All right, let us transition into the show.
Let's jump
We're gonna
in.
move on from the garden chat and into the Kessel chat. That's okay.
Exactly. Punch it.
I gotta get a better sound effect for that intro. And I need to get. I had one before, but I don't know what happened to it. So I'll find a sound effect that'll work with that. I will.
Right
What's
on.
up? What is up, Gaurav? So tonight,
Hey.
we're changing things up just a little bit. So originally today we had planned on doing some comic book stuff, but we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait because, and I apparently did not upload the correct because we're not doing haters gonna hate. I will change that while we're talking.
Yeah, honestly though,
you give the intro. You can do the intro, and
I'm
I'll
gonna
fix
give the intro, but I am gonna say something about this. So last week we talked about this. If you didn't catch it last week's show, please feel free to check it out on YouTube. We talked a little bit about the haters gonna hate and toxic fandom, and some of that came across. Some of that was because of a video Jeff saw about lightsabers, but a lot of it recently has been about the Book of Boba Fett. And so what we want to do this is just a great time to be a Star Wars fan. This is a great time to be engaging in Star Wars because there's always like brand new content coming out. It's like being a Star Trek fan, to be honest. See, there you go, Rich. And there's so many new things that are coming out, whether it's the Book of Boba Fett or any of the brand new shows that are going to be coming out on Disney Plus. And so we want to actually use our weekly episode to jump into the thing that's the most current. And it just happens, of course, that right now we have got 4 episodes down of the Book of Boba Fett. And we're going to take tonight's show, at least the opening of tonight's show, to really dig in, talk about the things that we like, talk about the things that we don't like, talk a little bit about the fan reaction to things. And we already know that there is this kind of polarizing effect in the fan base right now about the Book of Boba Fett. And now that we are kind of moving more into the middle of this series, we're going to spend tonight's episode and every episode for the following weeks doing a little bit of a recap, no spoilers, doing a little bit of a recap of what we've seen, and again, kind of talk a little bit about what we like, what we don't like, and we'd love to have your comments as we go through this. So yeah, Jeff, I'd love to kind of start on your side. By the way, I saw Rich's comment about Will. I'm 100% okay with Wesley Crusher, so we can we definitely I'm on board with that. But we're gonna kick it off with Jeff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe we could actually start, because I don't think we've done this. Maybe we can actually start with, what did you think of when they said at the end of the Mandalorian season 2, they said, stay tuned, Book of Boba Fett. What was your expectations of the show? And then in this first 4 episodes, how are you feeling about it against what you originally thought the show was going to be and kind of where it is now?
That is a really fascinating question. You and I have talked about this like off the chat before to a varying degrees, but it's a hard thing for me to say because when I saw that, my first thought was, oh, that's really rad. We're going to get to learn who this character was. And I'll be honest, I kind of going down a rabbit hole here a little bit. There's a lot of people in the fandom out there that are like all hot and bothered about just anything Boba Fett. The idea of Boba Fett being in content. And I mean that like, they're like, oh my God, I want more. Just give me all the Boba Fett. But they don't know anything about him because other than a few comics and things here and there, like he wasn't in any TV shows, wasn't in any movies. I mean, he was in the Clone Wars as a kid, but the character we know very little about. So what we're seeing in this show is it's stuff that we're learning. Even Dave Filoni has said there were things in Legends. I shouldn't say Filoni. There was content in Legends that did come out. I think a couple things here and there, but Lucas has even said many times. I actually saw the recording of it on YouTube the other day because it was part of a conversation on TikTok, that he said he never considered what everyone loves to say, or everyone calls now Legends. He never considered it canon, ever. He said, if I made it was a movie that I made, a book, or something else, then it's mine. Then it's canon. And everything else is not. He considered it to be basically like if you're thinking like in Marvel, like there's Earth 616, which is where all the main things we know happen. Then there's the MCU, and there's all these other variants, like other versions of Earth in different places. That's how he always saw it. They're fun stories. They're enjoyable. They're not his stories, and they're not part of his. As a matter of fact, he even said that he never approved them. All he would do is kind of look at what they were doing and kind of give like a nod of like, yeah, that kind of falls in line with some of the stuff that we're doing. But it was never a cool, you're now accepted into canon. And so I say all of that to kind of not to put down anybody who loves Boba Fett as an example, because if you love him and you love those characters, that the stories were written, you're a fan. I will never tell someone not to be a fan for something. That said, coming into this show, when I've seen a lot of toxicity or negativity about this show, it's often about like, well, that's not what Boba Fett would have done, and we know who Boba Fett was. I'm like, no, you actually don't. You think you do, but coming into this show, we know next to nothing about Boba Fett. And I think everyone out there, in my opinion, who's walking into the show who has a negative view on it, it's because they're overlaying what they wanted Boba Fett to be into the show.
Yes.
For me, I'm actually thoroughly enjoying this. We've talked in past episodes, the last couple of weeks, about this show's still kind of getting its footing to a degree. Like its foundation it's still working on its story elements. Its editing is a little choppy in some cases, and they're still trying to. It seems like even some of the fade in, fade out for memories and stuff, they're still trying to figure out how to do it in a way that works. That doesn't feel
that narrative structure.
Yeah, that doesn't feel too forced. But I'm enjoying it. I'm thoroughly enjoying learning who this character is, but more importantly, learning who he is now. Because in the timeline, for anybody who is not a huge Star Wars geek like we are, Boba Fett fell into the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi. He fell into the Sarlacc pit in what would be in the Star Wars timeline would be considered 4 BBY, right? Was it? Yeah, 4 BBY.
Oh, yeah. It's what is it? After the Battle of Yavin. So just like a handful of years after Luke blows up the Death Star.
Yes, it was BBY.
Because there's the before the Battle of Yavin, and then there's after the Battle of Yavin.
Yes, that's right.
Like all the High Republic stuff and everything, you'll always see
that's
like
right,
BBY, like all that stuff, and then anything that's like the sequel trilogy, that's always like ABY.
Yeah. So this is taking place. The timeline I'm trying to get at, the timeline here is that he fell into the Sarlacc pit, and what we're seeing with the Tuskens is about 5 years later. So when he crawls out of the Sarlacc, he's been in the Sarlacc for 5 years. He even says that in one of the episodes that, like, when I fell in there so many years ago, like this seems like so many years ago. He makes a comment about that. So he's been in there for 5 years. So we've known nothing about the guy. So he's just climbing out, and we're just now getting to learn who is this person. What's he dealing with? And he's not the same person he was when he went in. Matter of fact, and I don't want to spoil last night's episode or episode 4, but there is some dialogue between him and Fennec Shand where he is talking specifically about that he has changed. And being with the Tuskens has made him a different person, or made him realize that he's a different person. And you start to hear a little bit more dialogue around why he wants to become a daimyo, or basically the leader of a house. Why does he want to become this? What's the impetus for that? And I'm kind of going on long here, but what I'm trying to get at is that I appreciate what they're doing with the story. They're taking a character that in canon we have very little information on, and they're making up a new story for him. But they're making up a new story for him on top of things people believed they knew. And I think that's hard because there's people who want to feel a certain way. But it gives you a freedom to be able to say, what do we want this character to look like? And do we want this character to just come out and be a bad baddie who just takes money and kills people? Like, okay, but arguably for bounty hunters, like Fennec Shand has always been a little bit more interesting. But if you're going to do that with a character like that, just make more IG-88s. There's no personality. It doesn't need to be. They just kill things or arrest people for money. If you're going to spend time doing a show, there needs to be a story development and a character arc that is building out of that. And I love it. I really enjoy the ways in which Boba is learning that we learned last night why he wants to have his own house, and why at least the basis for why the initial part. We haven't learned all of it, I'm sure, but we've learned the basics of why he wants to do this. But what we're also realizing, we're learning this in the second episode, I think it was, or maybe it was the first, when he heard from the mayor of Mos Espa that it takes more than it takes a lot to to have this family, to do what you're trying to do. You can't just do it by yourself. It's not a bounty hunter's job anymore. So I think what we're really getting to see is he wants to be different. He wants to change. He has a mindset, but he's also doesn't really know how to accomplish what he's trying to accomplish. He's falling back on his sort of street smarts to do it along the way. And I'll get back to, I guess I'll get to critiques a little bit later, because I have a couple things that are the last two episodes have been a little odd for me. So as far as like some of the functions in how they produced the film itself, but overall, I guess my answer is that I really do enjoy it, and I really love seeing the complexity of a character. Tamora Morrison is playing the role just so amazingly well, and the interactions between him and Ming-Na Wen playing Fennec are fantastic, because you realize that even as bounty hunters, they still have a lot of depth to them, like in a very interesting way. And like even Fennec, we learned last night why she stays with him and why she's still with him doing this work and didn't just go back to bounty hunting again. Because if you watch The Mandalorian, this shouldn't be a spoiler. If you watch The Mandalorian, you know that she was shot in the gut by a character in that, and Boba Fett, we saw Boba Fett walking into the scene. We just saw his feet, and then at this you get to see that recreated, of course, because they're going to show that. I won't say anything more than that. But why is she still with him? Like when we see later on, why is she still with him at the beginning of the series? You get to learn that. And I think that's a very fascinating, and it's kind of a heartwarming thing, because it's them both developing each other and helping each other realize that there's more to life than what they've been doing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll stop. Your turn, because I know you've got a lot of good insight on this too.
I think that you're summarizing a lot of the way that I feel. Now I'll put it this way. And by the way, I see some of Gorov's comments here about The Godfather, which is almost immediately when I started watching Book of Boba Fett, I was like, this feels like The Godfather. And I will also say that there are a lot of other things that I keep seeing references to. Like this whole series, and this could be the effect of Jon Favreau or Robert Rodriguez, or just the people that are involved in the people that are involved in making this series. Like when they were doing The Mandalorian, there was a lot of you saw a lot of Kurosawa. Mm-hmm. You saw Kurosawa. You saw the Kurosawa films that inspired the spaghetti western. So you saw Sergio Leone. You saw a lot of these tropes from these movies that came out in the 50s and the 60s, whether it was any of the Kurosawa films that really helped to craft it's funny because it's like you think of the modern western, you think of The Man with No Name, and that's really the samurai, that's the Ronin. Mm-hmm. And the honorable outsider, and so you look at Mandalorian, it's like steeped in things like that. And Star Wars is filled, it's like steeped in movies from the 20s and the 30s. Buck Rogers, Metropolis, Flash Gordon, all of these things, right? And then you watch this show, and this show to me feels like all of these movies I watched in the 70s. I get strong Godfather vibes from this. I saw all of these like very much like French Connection type things with the races. The train robbery. Oh my gosh, like there are so many train movies that are in the 70s. There's one with John Voight, which I'm blanking on the name, that actually was like a Canon film. And which is like surprising to me because Canon Films made so many terrible movies. But there are so many references to these like the 70s was this era of the anti-hero, and not an honorable anti-hero, very like shades of gray, very much people that you wouldn't trust, like someone that you're like, don't leave this guy alone with your family. You cannot trust him. There are parts of this series so far that I'm like, wow, like the Runaway Train. Thank you, Gorov. There are so many like moments where it's them meeting the mayor, or like all of these like things, people, criminals, the huts. It just reeks sometimes of The Godfather, and especially Godfather Part Two and the narrative structure, because Godfather Part Two is split between Michael Corleone in what it would be the present, and then Vito Corleone as he's building his empire. One of them is building a thing, and the other one is keeping a thing, and both of them are doing it because of what they feel like is protection for their family, protection for their community, being strong, by being able to protect their own. And that's what I was like, wow, this show is trying to do a lot of things with a character that most people feel like they already know.
Yeah.
So to your point, Jeff, I think that's like one of the issues is that people wanted to see Boba Fett be this, and for lack of a better term, a badass guy that was like disintegrating people. Kill Bill, I think Gorov talked about the Book of Boba Fett being a hit list. Like, this is a revenge story by Boba Fett. That would have been great, but honestly, we saw a badass in a Mandalorian armor, and that was the Mandalorian. So this show should be different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the issues is that they had too many good ideas, and they like didn't say no to some of them.
Yeah.
This is the problem with the show. The fourth episode is by far my favorite. By far my favorite, because narratively it works, structurally it works. I understand now why the first three episodes are building to the fourth episode. So now you get payoffs for all of these little seeds that they planted. But now I'm thinking, oh, you know what would have been helpful? This needed to be a 90-minute opening episode rather than 4 episodes over the course of 2 hours, because I think that you lost a lot of fans, and again, I think that they just had too many ideas. It was like someone saw Marlon Brando in The Wild One, which is another movie that is a favorite of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. That's where the character Mutt comes from in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Mm-hmm.
And then they saw that character and a greaser on a motorcycle, and they said, put that in Boba Fett. And then someone was like, okay, that's awesome. And then someone else saw Ghost in the Machine, and they saw cyberpunks, and they saw body modification, and they saw, wow, like what if we were to examine like the work that goes into, like, what is human, what's more human than human, and they Blade Runner and all these things in noir, and they were like, got it, let's just shove that into an episode. Mm-hmm. And again, it was like, it's too many big ideas, and I think that's what happened, is that they wanted to explore all these things, and they wanted to do it with this character, and they wanted to also explore a character growing older, a character who is a loner, and that's why you see him as a child alone, being left alone, finding community, supporting a community, building a family, very Vito Corleone. And then not recognizing, oh wait, people are bringing a ton of baggage to Boba Fett. People are remembering back when Boba Fett was a super stormtrooper and was all going to be in white when he showed up at Cloud City, and all these things, all this history for it. So I think that's what's happening, is there's this collision of things that's happening, where it's, they wanted to tell a story that was different than Mandalorian, which is what people wanted Boba Fett to be. They wanted to tell a story that also referenced a lot of the things that helped to craft those movies from the 70s and the early 80s, and shove that in there. And they also wanted to examine a lot of things, and it's just too many ideas.
Yeah.
And the episode 4 to me was the first time they were able to like part with some of those things and just get to the characters.
Yeah, I totally agree. There was more time with character development and more time with applying that character development into the story in episode 4 than the previous 3 episodes, for sure. Because there wasn't as much disconnect, or I shouldn't say that. The jumps to past events were much more connected, much more obviously connected to what was happening in front of us. And and I guess you can make a counter argument to that too, but also that it advanced the story. Those two things, that activity advanced the story further than the last ones did. So the previous ones we watched in the first 3 episodes, where we saw flashbacks to him coming out of the Sarlacc pit and Jawas taking his armor and the Tuscans starting to help him. They were helpful in getting to know where is Boba's mind at right now. But then when we would cut back to what was going on, it took kind of a leap or some analytics to realize what's the connection between those flashbacks and this right here. This was the first episode where the flashbacks were very obviously related to what was happening in front of you. And I'm not saying that stories should always make it that obvious, because there is a benefit in the mystery sometimes and having to think about it a little bit so you find the nuance. But I think what happened in the first 3 episodes is they distanced them a little too far apart. And so a casual watcher of the show probably would have been sad. It probably did. That's what, like, we've seen a lot of comments about this. Probably sat back and go, I'm very confused. What's happening? You and I can sit there, and others who are like a lot of people I follow on TikTok and other places on YouTube, a lot of our friends, people we know, watch it and go, oh, okay, I can definitely see the connections. But these shows really should be about not just catering to us, but catering to anybody who wants to consume this and enjoy these stories. And I think sometimes there just needs to be a balance between those two things. Something else in this episode that kind of stuck with me a little bit, and this is kind of a detractor for me a little, is in the previous episodes when they would do a cutscene over to his flashback, the edges of the film would get a little fuzzy, whatever else. It would change a little bit. You knew it was a flashback. But in this one, like the last episode and this one, they did something that reminds me a lot. I don't know if you've ever played the game Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Oh, yep, I have.
So when you go to those places where you take the camera and you hold the camera up, and then all of a sudden Link gets a memory hits him. And it fades in with like these greenish, like this like aqua green sort of imagery where it like fades out, and then a memory, and then as he's getting distant and he can barely hear it anymore, the memory fades back with that color. That's exactly what it looked like to me in the episode last night. It was like it's a cool effect. I'm not knocking the effect, but it wasn't applied consistently across the episodes. And to me, that's a miss, because it then felt like they were changing up how they wanted to do it. And my wife and I were watching it last night, and she's like, I don't understand. What are they doing? What is this fuzziness? She goes, why is this now here? I'm like, that's a valid point, because you didn't see it in the first 2 episodes, at least not so prominently. And it's almost like they were changing their minds a bit, which I get, that's fine. But to me, it kind of, it was confusing because it stood out. It was very obvious that it was happening, and it didn't quite make sense to a casual viewer, I think.
Yeah, I and this is where I think that they kind of got lost in and when I'm talking about the narrative structure, it's exactly like what you're talking about, which is like, okay, now we're going to do a flashback here. And again, like Godfather 2 is a really great model for what they're trying to do here, because Godfather 2, when Francis Ford Coppola put together the idea for Godfather 2, where he was going to have the two stories running in parallel, the flashbacks to Vito, the present day with Michael. George Lucas read the script and said, "Oh, you made a mistake here. This is 2 movies. It's not 1." And Francis Ford Coppola, to his credit, said, "I think you're wrong, George. I think I could make this 1 movie." And then did so, and it really ended up working out. But for those of you who have watched it, one, it's a super long movie, and it doesn't flow as perfectly as The Godfather does. I mean, The Godfather is just like and I'm not trying to be like this sounds pretentious, but it's like a perfect movie. The Godfather 2, though, is oddly, in my opinion, like a better movie, because it does have all of this complexity, and they're able to manage the timelines, but they can really like take you out of it. Like at one moment you might be with Michael in a hotel, or you're with Michael in Cuba, and then you have to go back with Vito. And that storyline is, oh yeah, that's right, this is why this is important. And those things work well because they're showing 2 characters contrasting. And I think that's where the narrative is failing here, is that I think it would actually have worked better if you would have seen more of the work that Boba is, where he's like, I reject this. I reject community. I reject all of these things. And then spending more time there. So that way the parallel stories, Boba in the present day and Boba after the Sarlacc pit, are the diametrically opposed until they meet. Where it's like, no, this is who he is. I actually think that we'll probably get fewer of these flashbacks now, and I think that they're just the way that they handled it in this last episode. I also think that's why they changed a little bit of like how they're trying to do the wipes. But the one movie that I didn't bring up that I feel like this has a tremendous amount of allusions to, and I know a lot of other people have talked about this, is there's another movie about a messianic figure on a desert planet. There were times where I was like, is this gonna be Dune? Are we gonna Dune this? Like I and even the wipes, like some of the wipes, the flashbacks, there was parts of it that reminded me very much of like the Lynchian David Lynch Dune. And I was like, oh, is that what you guys are going for now? Because yeah, like again, I think there's just a lot of ideas, and I think that's even now crept into visually how they're trying to format the look of the picture. So yeah.
Yeah, I can see that a little bit. I am very curious. Do we know how many episodes this is supposed to be?
Gosh, it's funny. Before we started today's show, I even thought, oh god, I don't know how many it's going to be, if it's going to be 8 or 10. But I will say that I feel like we're finally to the midpoint.
It does feel
or at least it's like those first 3 episodes were kind of rough there. Yeah, they were kind of rough. I'm not gonna lie. Like, and it's funny when you were talking to Jeff about there. I actually think it was a different type of fan service. It was more like fans of Star Wars were forgiving. We were patient. We were watching those first couple episodes, I think, and we were like, okay. And by the way, like, I'm not throwing hate on this show the way that other, like, I feel like people are just irrational, like the naming of the Boba Fett ship. It's like, let that go. Like, I have no idea why people are freaking out about that.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't see a bunch of people freaking out about other things that changed over time, or references in Rogue One, for example, that I didn't see the same outrage for things.
Yeah.
So I don't understand like what the deal is. But I will say that I think fans were. I think they almost were like, fans are gonna forgive this, and I almost kind of think about if Mandalorians would have started out this wobbly in the first couple of episodes, I don't know if it would have been able to sustain a fan base.
Yeah.
I think you look back at the first 3 episodes. You look back at the first episode of The Mandalorian, and it is something else. The first 3 episodes, which are for The Mandalorian, spoilers, so tune away if you don't know. The first 3 episodes are the finding of the child, having to rebuild the ship after the ship's been stripped by Jawas, and then delivering of the child, and deciding to run with the child.
Yep.
To the honorable criminal, and those first 3 episodes are amazing television. It's amazing storytelling. And the 4th episode becomes a brand new set in the chapters. I think this is where the first 3 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett really kind of uneven, and I think this 4th episode really tied it all together. And I feel like maybe patience has paid off. I think now it's gonna take off.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think this was the place where all these different little threads are being pulled together in an interesting way, and I think the turn of events is going to be this focus now on the Pikes, which we saw in a previous episode as well. So that shouldn't be news. I'm not going to talk anymore about like what actually happens, but this turn towards the Pikes. I'm really enjoying the fact that they're bringing the Pikes into into the show as an antagonist of sorts, although we have yet to see the level of which they are going to be antagonizing. I don't know, whatever the word would be at that point. Well, like, all we know so far is that, I mean, we know the Pikes from the Clone Wars and Rebels and other places. So we've seen them before. We understand that there are people, but they're also kind of a criminal empire, and they run spice and all that type of stuff. And we're hearing all of this propaganda and drama from characters in the show, but we haven't actually seen the Pikes do anything bad yet. Like, they haven't literally done anything yet. And so I get the sense that they're being right now almost, I don't say falsely, but sort of as a misdirect. I kind of feel like the Pikes are kind of being set up as a misdirect, where
kind of like the Trade Federation, or as Qui-Gon would say, there's always a bigger fish.
Exactly.
So
there's always a bigger fish. Calm down, Jar Jar. You just have to. Never mind. Just sorry. Remember that scene where he gets all worked up and Qui-Gon just like touches his back and he passes out and he goes, he got too worked up. He got too excited. He just got too excited.
You overdid it.
Yeah.
Great.
But yeah, I get the sense that they're sort of a misdirect. I could be wrong, that'd be fine, but it feels like too simple of a story for another criminal group to just show up and now we fight the criminal group and we're all going to band together to fight the criminal group, or just stay out of my way or whatever, and we're going to fight the criminal group. Like, okay, and you could do that and probably would be interesting to watch. But I don't know, I feel like there's going to be something else that is occurring under the like in the background, or some other sort of through line that is occurring here that we haven't seen yet, but that has been hinted at. And that's what I'm really hoping for. I'm hoping to see that, because that will sort of put Boba's character to the test in a way of not just being like, how do I protect this place? Because he'll have to show, if you're going to be a daimyo, how do you protect people that are here? How do you actually be the good guy, so to speak, but not really, you're still going to be a criminal, but like, how do you be the anti-hero? But also because it wouldn't be so obvious if we did this. If we did this, if they do that, it won't be such an obvious thing. I think we've seen a hint of that with the, I forget the character's name, but who shows up to basically say that these punks on motorcycles or space Vespas are stealing my water or what have you. And the way that he talks to Boba Fett, and then the way that he gets upset with Boba Fett when Boba tells him to just take a certain amount of money and be happy with it and let the matter go, he grumbled. I don't think, honestly, that that's the end of it for him. And I don't know that he may be the big character behind it, but I get a sense that his character represents a theme that we're going to see pop back up that is in relation to the Pikes. That's sort of the thought that I have right now, that something to do with corruption or businesses within Mos Espa is in relation to a connection to the Pikes and why the Pikes are there. But the Pikes are really there for their own sort of interest, but they're not there purely because they are like wanting to take the planet over. I don't know. That seems too monster of the week for me. So I'm hoping that it won't be something like that, and something more intricate than that.
I'm really interested in the whole history of Tatooine. I really liked that. That's where I felt like the most Dune vibes, where the Tusken Raiders are kind of relaying the story of their origin. I also don't think I honestly don't feel like it's lost that Tamora Morrison, who's of Maori origin, like there's a real interesting connection there, and I was really like, I that was a part of the first couple episodes that I was like, I could spend more time here with this. I really like this, because I feel like I feel like right now there's a box that's slowly being opened. Like they're kind of revealing things a little bit at a time, and this is where, to Gorov's point about feeling like this is like the Godfather. One of the things that I remember in The Godfather, and that's why when the Pikes and all this stuff came up with the Pikes, I was like, oh, these are the Tatalias. The Tatalias seem to be the ones that are after the Corleones, but it's not the Tatalias, it's Don Barzini. And by the way, I'm sorry if I just spoiled a, 40-year-old movie.
I've never seen any of them, so.
Oh, no! Fine. Oh,
I've never watched. It's totally fine. I'm probably never going to watch them. So I can listen to you talk about them all day long, but then when I actually go see them someplace, I go like, maybe I'm not watching that. I'll just go back and ask Ryan. He'll tell me, and I'll be much more entertained by listening to you talk about it.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it is like one of my favorite movies. And it's funny because my wife is Italian, and so I'm always like, and my wife's not just my wife's Sicilian, and so I'll always like be like, this is like your family story right here. I you don't need to watch Godfather 3, but you'll love Godfathers 1 and 2, not just because of their great movies, but because they're referenced so much too, Jeff, and it is a lot of fun to see those references pop up everywhere.
I am just getting flamed in the chat right
um,
now.
but that's why it was like, while I've been watching the Book of Boba Fett, I've been like, oh man, this is like throwing off some major Godfather vibes, and especially with the Pikes, because the mystery of both Godfather movies is who is really behind it all.
Mhm.
Like, who is, and that's also a like analogy for the mob itself. Like, who's the one that's pulling the strings, and that's like why it's the pulled strings in the logo. And who's the person that's really pulling the strings behind the mob, and then in the mob, who's the one that's pulling the strings behind all of this chaos. And then there is this amazing baptismal scene at the end of Godfather, which I'm sure you know of, Jeff, just probably culturally, but it is like unbelievable. And it is referenced so many times, and I will not be surprised if we get the Godfather baptismal scene in the Book of Boba Fett, because I feel like that's what we're getting. There's the 5 families that which we're getting to. We saw this in the trailer, where Boba Fett is talking to the other families, and that happens in the Godfather too. And again, there's just Tamora Morrison's like a really great heavy, and what I mean by a heavy is like like the classic term of a heavy in a film, like someone like Marlon Brando, who can just like, he just occupies the space, and it's just the whole look at what they did to my boy. Like seriously, there's so many. Oh gosh, I mean, it's really this movie, this whole series so far, and is throwing off the vibes. I do want to talk though about another thing, and I want your thoughts on this, Jeff. Which is, I agree with you that there is this slow burn that's happening, where we're getting slow rolled, like cards are being turned over one at a time, and I'm waiting for the next card to be turned over. And this doesn't feel like some silly mystery box that I've seen in other shows. This actually seems like it's planned out. Like, we're getting a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And that's the beauty of Star Wars. You're like Luke. You only get the information that you need. You don't get all of it, and some of it's a lie. And I'd like to shift though away from the story structure and talk a little bit about the action. So in these last 4 episodes, I have to say that this last episode was my favorite, from an action perspective. The other episodes, there was a chase, there was a fight in Tashi Station. There's all of these crazy things that happen. But this episode, I thought, and maybe it's the use of Fennec, I was like, this is it. Like, this feels just a great action set pieces, up to and including when they're on the fire spray. I don't mind saying fire spray. When they're on the fire spray, I loved every bit of that. Jeff, what were your thoughts on the action?
I appreciated the action in episode 4 more so than the other episodes. For me, it felt more they were more necessary actions than simply action scenes. And what I mean by that is, in the other episodes, any of the fighting that occurred, either between the Tuskens and Boba, or the Tuskens and the train and these other things, they had to happen for the story, to move the story forward. But they felt like fight scenes for the sake of a fight scene. And okay, like I'm okay. I'm generally okay with action in TV shows and movies. But in this episode, it felt more like everything that was being done for a specific purpose, and only as much the amount of action that was taking place on the screen was only as much as was necessary to move the story forward, but not anymore. So in a couple of the scenes, we were trying to spoil, but in a couple of the scenes where we actually see Fennec at her best, it's only for a limited period of time, and not because they couldn't make her just rock the house, but it wouldn't serve much of a purpose in moving the narrative forward at that point. She needed to do enough so we can know she's a badass. We don't see Boba physically doing as much. We see him doing an amount, but not as much as her, for a very specific set of reasons, I think, which is he's still recovering. He's not the person he was before. They are distinctly different characters. He's a badass for different reasons than she is.
Yep.
She's and she is a badass in her own right. She's intelligent. She is strategic. All of these things. They are each those things, but in different ways. And I appreciate that they're treating the characters vastly different on screen in moving the story forward, so that we don't ever feel like they are one and the same, because they are not. And I think that is absolutely necessary for their two characters, or else we're basically seeing copies of Boba Fett talking to Boba Fett. That's not what we want. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to see that. You want Fennec to be a different personality and persona and approach situations differently than he does, to also be a sounding board for him. But he needs to be different too. He needs to be his own person with his own struggles. And so, like, even the scene where Black Stanton in episode 3, when he rips Boba Fett out of the Bacta tank, I'm trying to remember the flashback that he was having before that, but the flashback he was having before that felt very connected to the action that occurred afterwards. So what happened when Black Stanton then rips him out of the tank? I think it was a really good plot device to have that flashback occur before that action, and have Boba then yet again jolted out of something that he wasn't expecting to happen to him, and then be put into a place where he has to, like, try to figure out, like, become coherent and do something. It takes some action in that moment, and you see him. He's not at his best, or he's not at the best everyone wants to assume is who Boba Fett is. Now, we know he is not fully healed. Actually, we hear it later on that you're fully healed now, or what have you. But, like, he's not fully healed yet. We know that, so he's also at a disadvantage. But I think it's actually kind of interesting that he is not fully healed and still having to deal with this, because we realize that he is not the badass in the way that everyone walked into these shows assuming he was going to be. And again, I appreciate that, because it's kind of forcing part of the fandom to reckon with whoever you thought Boba Fett was when we showed up at this show. That is not the character that is actually in existence. We're about to tell you who this character really is, and I sincerely appreciate that, because to me, I can basically put aside any campiness that might exist with the hypercolor, motorcycles, which I love, but they're a little flashy and maybe didn't have to be quite that way. I can put some of that stuff aside, because I recognize that they play a part in the larger narrative, and that what we're seeing of Boba Fett is this thing developing that we've never seen before. And I appreciate it. Like, even the interactions between him, and I forget the character's name who plays the Twi'lek bar owner. I forget what her name was. But even the interactions between the two of them, although brief, I think are still very interesting to show the type of character that Boba is and how other people interact with him. They don't just see him as a merciless bounty hunter anymore. He's been gone for a long time. He takes his helmet off now and he interacts with people, but he's not fierce. And it's really interesting to see how people respect him, yet still can have a dialogue with him. So I don't know. I find all those elements really interesting about how it's playing out. And I'm with you. I would say episode 4 was definitely my favorite episode, because it gets us to a place we can really start seeing what is the next step in the story going to be. This needed to happen to get us here, but I think the next episode really is going to take us to what is the larger story they're trying to tell in this show.
Yeah, it's funny, because I was thinking of the bar owner, and I was like, I know it's Jennifer Beals, and I'm like, what is her name?
Yes.
I agree with you. I liked the action, because I felt like it was less of a set piece. I almost felt like the action again in the other episodes felt so much like oh hey, like we got to show something real cool right here. Ideas, and then someone was like, hey man, I saw Runaway Train and that was pretty BA, and they were like, let's do that, let's do Runaway Train. And that's kind of what some of those action sequences felt like. I like you said, I like a great action sequence when it's I enjoy it. Like, there are some movies where it's like, they're terrible movies, but man, this is a solid action sequence and I can get behind it. There was I felt in 4 great action sequences help to move a plot forward, help to show something about a character, and I think you got a little bit of that with Boba being rustled out of the back to tank, because then suddenly he's having to face things. I actually started to think of another movie from the I think it's from the early 80s. I don't think it's the late 70s, but it's a movie called Jacob's Ladder, which also has a spoiler twist
Oh,
in that one. And
I'm
I've been
remembering this.
watching, yes, I've been watching a lot of the Boba in the back to tank, and even the shot where it's just kind of like his shoulders and up. And I've been like, man, this looks a lot like Jacob's Ladder. And I actually wouldn't be against some type of crazy, like, his memories are not right type of memories. It's like Jacob's Ladder. It's a bigger type of, it's a Last Temptation of Christ kind of thing. But Jacob's Ladder it's a great it's a great movie. It's famous for its twist, and but it's also a movie where it's a character that's kind of dealing with their own morality, and it's a character dealing with trying to make the right decisions, and trying to find their way after being scarred through war. And that's where I think we really see Boba Fett. And that's why it's like the action sequences need to mean more than just be cool. They should
Hmm.
actually be things like what we saw in episode 4, which is you see interplay between Boba and Fennec. You see their personalities. You see how they rely on each other. You see how they support one another, and it starts to really show the formation of their relationship, what they rely on. And in a show like this, where you have honor among thieves, it's also important to see how they can learn to trust one another.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I feel like that's what made the episode 4 action sequences so good, is that they were about something. They weren't just something.
Yes.
It's a really great example of another movie I'll bring up from the 70s, which is The French Connection. Popeye, who's played by Gene Hackman, he's like driving his car like crazy, and it's one of the greatest. It's one of the greatest sequences of like car footage outside of Bullet. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And he's just driving like crazy because he's chasing somebody down, and you realize that in that's how obsessed he is. That's how hard he's gonna pursue, is he's that crazed, and he's just like screaming in the car, and you just feel the claustrophobia of not only the car, but oddly he's like in the street, in the world, and you feel like, oh my gosh, these buildings, these other cars, and this elevated train, everything's so tight. It's so tight. And you learn a lot about his character through that action sequence, and I think that's what's awesome about what episode this fourth episode did, is that it did that.
Yeah.
So I will say there's one other thing that I really feel though is missing from this show, and it could be because of the even though I really loved the mayor. I loved that mayor.
Oh,
I
I
loved the
want to see more
droid.
Thorians on TV. I want to see more Thorians for sure.
I love some of the voice acting. The guy who does the Toast of London. I mean, I love some of the voice acting. I keep expecting that droid to say, I hear you, Clem Fandango. I'm serious. Like, there's so many great voice actors that are being used, but something that's missing that I loved in The Mandalorian is the first part of The Mandalorian is owned by of course, right as I'm saying this, Werner Herzog.
Oh my
And
god.
And I feel like they didn't write any of Werner Herzog's lines. I feel like he just showed up there. They gave him a lot of alcohol, and then they said, just action. And he was like, bounty hunting is a complicated profession, and all of these crazy. Let's have would you like a libation to celebrate the ending of our shared narrative? Like, that's like classic Werner Herzog. Like, it's like crazy. Only he can deliver those lines. He brings so much characterization there. And then after he's out of the picture, it's Giancarlo Esposito. And that guy just brings weight to any scene.
Oh, he does.
Back from when he was on Breaking Bad, everything. And that's kind of what I feel like we're missing here.
Yeah.
We're missing some, and I almost feel like it's such a miss that is because it's going to be revealed. That there's such a, like, if I was to shade in all of the things that are happening in this show, there's this big hole in the middle around, like, where is my Werner Herzog? Where is my Giancarlo Esposito? Where is this great actor that might be popping up here, that is not under some type of makeup or is just a voice actor? I feel like there's something.
So there is a rumor going around. I think the rumor in the form that I have heard is crap. I'm just gonna hot take there. I think it's crap. But
if I'm going to throw this out here, because I think I know what this could be, and I'm going to say spoiler alert for this, and this is only like potential spoilers because we don't know this, and there's no evidence that this is happening. So if you don't want to listen, you don't listen because you don't.
I should have had a big banner that just flashes up. Spoiler. Yeah. Like, conjecture, speculation.
I've heard this, and I think Jeff's speculation. I agree. I don't think it's going to happen, but I've heard it. I think what you're going to say. Go on ahead.
So the speculation, one of them is, and the one I've heard is that the girl, the female character that we meet, who's one of the part of the Cycle Gang, that she is the daughter of Han Solo and Kira. Kira being his first love from Corellia and the leader of the Crimson Dawn. Well, post Maul, working with Maul and becoming the leader of the Crimson Dawn. And what I've heard is that somehow she is in trouble with the Pikes or with something else going on, and Han is actually going to show up to try to help her, or he shows up, he's already there and learns who she is, and that he's going to try to help and whatever else. I think that connection is a little crappy, personally. I don't think they're going to retcon Han's story to the point of he got Kira pregnant, because that we never saw that. They didn't have that physical relationship at all in the Solo movie. I mean, they did at the very, very beginning of the movie, and they were kids, and then he was gone for a long time. And when they meet up again, they don't have any physical relations that we're seeing. Like, they flirt, but that's about the extent of it. So, like, retconning that to interject another kid into the story that would be outside of Leia, to me feels a little like, I don't know, that feels a little off-brand. But I am on board with the idea that Han may actually be here. That Han, as a spice trader, that he might actually be around or doing something nearby. Like, he used to come to Tatooine periodically and hang out in Mos Eisley. He was around Jabba. I don't think it's too far-fetched to either see Han show up, but I think even more likely would be Crimson Dawn. Crimson Dawn, I think, could be an interesting thing to see. What I don't know at this point, even with the comic book Crimson Reign series that just came out, I can't tell if Kira is actually still alive and if the Crimson Dawn is still operating at the time this TV show is taking place in the timeline. That I'm not entirely. Our friend Brandon probably would know that better than we would, but I'm curious about that. But I could see either Kira or a Crimson Dawn-esque thing, to your point, of like an underlying, they're here, we see at the end of it, they're not mentioned, something bigger is happening, and we see the spray paint of the Crimson Dawn, the Crimson Dawn symbol someplace on a building. I could see something like that happening, to your point, where there's more here going on than we're aware of, but kind of like bury the lead to the very end. I don't know. Is that the speculation that you were thinking?
That's exactly it. I've heard a lot of speculation, including like some Emilia Clarke speculation, which, again, like, I'm a big fan of the Mother of Dragons. So if she pops up into this show, like, I'm not going to be against that.
Yeah.
The thing that the thing that I've been waiting for though is some other villain.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know that when Moff Gideon shows up, I was totally surprised by that. And when it was Giancarlo, I thought Werner Herzog was going to be our bad guy in The Mandalorian, and he's already so great. And everything he does is great. Like all of his documentaries are insane. If the Grizzly Man, by the way, is like a crazy documentary. If you ever watch that, and his narration is amazing. And also when he was on Rick and Morty, oh my gosh, Werner Herzog, it's like that is still a thing that I just think of and laugh. And by the way, I see that Rich got the name of Matt Berry. Thank you so much for that. I'm a big fan of Matt Berry and all of his comedy and all of the shows that he's been on. He was the one that I was speaking of when I was talking about Toast of London. I have not seen Toast of Tinseltown, but I'm a big fan of Matt Berry. And I'm looking at Gorov's comment here about the French Connection, which is just like blowing my mind. That's like so crazy cool. French Connection is like one of my favorite movies, so that's so awesome that your that hill is by your high school. Like that's crazy. But yeah, it's like I'd love to see something like that reveal of Giancarlo Esposito. I'd love to see something that has that like a really meaty character, like a character that's just like got a lot of like great depth to it, that's played by a really great actor, that can pose a real genuine threat, not a physical threat. All of these threats so far to Boba have been physical threats. Your antagonist needs to be someone who can take advantage of, who turns all of your protagonist's strengths into weaknesses. Boba's a tough dude, so that's why like all of these physical threats don't matter. It'd be great to see someone who could really attack, really take him apart.
Yeah, so, I agree. The psychological side of these things to really create some more intrigue and some more depth, and maybe even see the show continue on longer. Because it was just a bad baddie where we fight off the Pikes and yay, we won with us. But I mean, cool. That would be fun to watch. But yeah, especially all this depth we're getting to see with Boba Fett and like the Rancor as an example. Like I'm really curious to see what that turns into. And I don't mean he rides a Rancor into town and scares everybody. Now I don't like that. I don't like that for him and for the character. I like seeing because even in that scene where the Rancor like timely grab some greats, we see this. Sorry, I small spoiler, everybody. I apologize. I just realized I was doing that. But the way that Boba Fett, his character, plays with the Rancor at that moment is very casually and very chill. And as soon as he does what he does, the Rancor is chilled out again. And I think there is going to be something more interesting to his interaction with creatures like the Bantha, his relationship he had with the Bantha when he meets Fennec. I think there's something more interesting to that relationship that we're going to see throughout this that I think plays into, like you said, if we're gonna have a bad guy, an antagonist show up, it's gonna have to be somebody who is very anti what we're seeing Boba develop into. And to your point, it cannot be somebody who comes in with guns blazing, shooting from the hip, blowing buildings up. It's gonna have to be something much more psychological and cerebral than that for it to actually work. If you do the opposite and make it, gunslinger shows up in town and only room for one of us in this town, boy, meet you at high noon on the street. Like if we do that, this very spaghetti Western, it's not going to go anywhere. Like it just won't feel earned or genuine or anything to that nature. But yeah, I'm very curious. I would love to see them really play off like Crimson Dawn or something like that. I really would love to, because at the time period this is taking place in, I really do feel like Crimson Dawn is a thing still. So that would be fascinating if we see Crimson Dawn brought into the picture outside of the comics and outside of cartoons and things like that. Like, I'll try to find the run here in a second. I think I have the books over here, but there's a new. Here's part of it. So they're doing like crossover stuff. This is one of the latest issues of it, but this is within Doc Afro, but kind of like they did War of the Bounty Hunters, where it's part of this Crimson Reign draw. But this is, I think this is the second release. The first release that was actually just released as Crimson Reign came out a few weeks ago, and it really does talk about, it's telling the story of Kira and Crimson Dawn and who they are, and it's really fascinating to see what the intricacies of what that looks like. So I don't know. I mean, I could keep talking about that, but that's what I'm excited to see, is the antagonist not just be. It could be a single actor like you're describing. I'd also love to see it be something more like this. Like, it could be Kira, but really the threat is not Kira. It's what Crimson Dawn or something like this represents that he has to now deal with, because they're not just her. Because if she goes away, there's so much more behind that. That would be, to me, like, really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I would really like to see that. I'm also okay if like the Fremen appear and Boba Fett is somehow the Kwisatz Haderach. If that happens too. But no, I'm right there. Like, I'm cool if it's Kira. I'm cool if it's Red Dawn. I'm sorry, there's another movie from the 80s, Red Dawn, right. Crimson Dawn. But yeah, like I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. I know that we're starting to get over time, but I want to ask you 3 questions.
Shoot.
So we've gone through the first 4 episodes. I feel like this would be fun to do in every week if we were to give it a letter grade. So my 3 questions to you are, after watching these first 3 episodes, Book of Boba Fett, if you had to give it a grade, what would it be? And what's one thing they should keep doing? And what's one thing that you hope they stop doing?
Good question. And Garo, thanks for being here, buddy. We really appreciate you joining the show. Have a good night, man.
Thank you so much, man.
So if I had to give it a grade, I would give it at this point, as of episode 4, probably an A-. Just because the build-up took a little long, and I probably would give the first couple episodes like a B+ or a B, because I'm enjoying it, whatever. But I think they've come back up.
Yep.
So that was my letter grade, or there you go, like maybe an 8 out of 10 or 8.5 out of 10 on Rich's scale. What was the second part of that you wanted to know? If I could change something.
What's one thing that you want to see more of, and what's one thing that you hope they stop doing?
I want to see more of Boba's interactions with the people in Mos Espa. I want to see him in town in Mos Espa, talking to people. I especially want to see him interacting with the bar owner. I feel like there's some significance there that we haven't been shown yet, that almost like she kind of runs the town, so to speak. I feel like there's more there, and I want to see him interacting with more people in town that is not just with him being stoic. So I would love to see more of that. What I would love to see them do less of, and I said it earlier, but I'll say it again, I want to see them doing less of that Breath of the Wild green transition thing between I don't like it. Yeah. It's just a me thing, but I really don't like it. To me, it kind of they could do it differently. To me, it just kind of takes me out of the moment. It feels weird to me. I don't know how best to say it. But turn the tables to you. If you were to give it a grade, what's your grade? What's your want to see more of, and what's your want to see less of?
I would give it, I'm between a B and like a B-. Like, I really think the 4th episode has been like amazing. I almost feel like, I remember when I went and saw episode 2, and I know that this is like a weird callback, and episode 2 is obviously not a strong entry into the movie series. And I'm talking about Star Wars episode 2, The Attack of the Clones. But I remember watching that and thinking, why didn't we just start here? Why did we start way back in episode 1? Why didn't we just start here?
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of felt when I was watching this 4th episode of the Book of Boba Fett. I was like, man, why didn't we just start here? Like, or like maybe if we needed to do more of the story with him and the Tusken Raiders, like work that a little bit in, maybe make an hour-long show. I feel like the 1st and 4th episodes I've been the most on board with. And then the 2nd and the 3rd one were a little bit like... they were a little bit uneven, and so I'd give it like a solid B. And but the 4th episode's moving in the right direction. Things I'd like to see more of, and going off the 4th episode, I'd love to see more action sequences that matter, like not just action sequences that are fun or like really crazy cool things, but like those really like character forming action sequences. And the big thing I'd like to see more of is Fennec. I feel like that character is underutilized to an unbelievable amount so far. I know that it's the Book of Boba Fett and that she is a side character, but The Godfather was about Michael Corleone, but Fredo and Sonny and Tom Hagen, like all of these characters are huge. To go back to Gorov's comment about The Godfather, it's still okay to have these other characters give a moment to shine. So I'd love to see more of Fennec. I'd love to see more of these side characters. Give more time to them so that way we can care about them. I mean, I think about The Mandalorian and how you care about all of these other characters that you run into. I mean, even Carl Weathers. I mean, it's great. Grief Karga. And then the thing that I'd like to see less of is I think the experiment with the Bacta memory narrative, I hope that's run its course. I'm kind of past that. I almost feel like they wanted to build up all of this past history, and they kept setting it in almost a dreamlike setting. But because it doesn't run either in parallel to what's happening in the present or in conflict against it, or if they're trying to do it, it's just not working. I hope that we're done with that. I hope that every episode now is moving the story forward and spending time with these characters that we know.
Yes, I agree with you on that one. 100% agree.
Yeah.
And Britton, by the way, I saw your comment. I'm so sorry. It just came out, and I apologize. I really was trying hard. It shouldn't really affect the moment if you haven't watched the episode yet, but I do apologize. I wasn't trying to spoil it for anybody.
Good deal.
Awesome. Well, listen, we are a little over what we usually go to, but this is good. I'm so glad that we suggested we dive into it because we've got some special stuff happening next week. So I'll have a couple announcements and changes to the format of the show in a good way. We'll have a guest on next week, so it'll be awesome. And before we wrap, I just want to call out a couple things. So we've talked about comics a lot of times. We're going to talk about that more coming soon, but there's so many that have been released for Star Wars and a variety of others. I am a massive, if you haven't picked up one already, I am a massive fan of Star Wars The High Republic. So if you haven't been reading these comics, you absolutely need to be reading these comics. They're amazing. This box on my floor that you can kind of barely see right down there, that whole box is filled up with just comics from The High Republic that have released in the last year. That's just a box of, that's not the other boxes of comics back here. That's just Star Wars The High Republic. So many good stories, and there's the High Republic, which is this run that's going. There is High Republic Adventures, which is kind of more young adult, I would say. The stories in the adventures are more on the young adult side, but that even has a splinter. So the High Adventures main through line is this cover right here, which still featured the Nihil, which is the main kind of antagonist-ish in the High Republic. This is a new one that just came out called Galactic Bake Off Spectacular. It's much more focused to kids, but they're still really enjoyable. This character, by the way, for anyone who is just seeing this character right here, I forget the race, but that character, he is a healer. He's a Jedi healer, and you'll love his name. He goes by Buckets of Blood. I'm not joking. He calls himself Buckets of Blood, and a couple times in there, people ask the question like, Buckets of Blood? Like, he's like, I'm a healer. I'm just around a lot of blood all the time because I heal people. And he's like, but whenever he runs into action, he's like, Buckets of Blood is here. And you're like, what? Okay. So some people call him Buck. Other people call him Bob. But he literally refers to himself in the third person as Buckets of Blood. It is hilarious. But he's a Jedi healer, and he actually doesn't. The fact that he has a lightsaber up here, he says in one of the other earlier issues, he doesn't really like pulling out his lightsaber. He does not like to fight. He prefers to stand back and heal people that he can and help people, but he still yells Buckets of Blood. It is absolutely hilarious. But the new one that just came out, this is beautiful. It's like twice the thickness. Wow. It's called Eye of the Storm. This character's name is Markion Rowe, and the antagonist we've been seeing called the Nihil, these space pirates. He is their leader, so he is the current leader of it. And this whole issue starts a new run of this series, Eye of the Storm, which I don't know how long it's going to go for, but it's a sub run going that is all about who he is, his race. Because in all the books, So all these books back right here behind me, all of these books on the shelf that are all High Republic books. We see him. We know nothing about him. We don't know where he comes from, and we don't know why he or his people hate the Jedi, why they're doing any of these things. We have no idea. In this book, we start to learn, sort of like in issue number 1 of Crimson Reign, where we're learning more about Kira and the Crimson Dawn. Same here. We're starting to learn, who is this person? Why does he behave the way that he does? At least in some part. So we've only learned a little bit, but it's a beautiful story. The artwork is gorgeous. He's from a storm planet where literally the entire planet is like a gas cloud with a small core in the middle. But the people have learned to create islands that float in these storms, and they live in this. And the way they drew it is just beautiful. The art, the story is almost poetic in how it's told. It's almost prose, I should say. So,
oh, wow.
Beautiful, beautiful stories that are coming out. If someone out there hasn't picked these books up or check them out, Eye of the Storm would be a great place to start, but any of these books would be amazing. And then there's always, of course, like the Darth Vader runs that are still going, that are fantastic stories. You and I love Dr. Aphra is
big fan. I think that's awesome.
I want to see her in a show so bad. She is so far, like, she's not even anti-hero. She's like the bad guy that you love, but she's pretty terrible. She's objectively terrible, but you love her.
Oh, no.
Like, absolutely love her.
No, that's what I mean. I actually hope that the Book of Boba Fett actually it starts to open up the door to some of those characters. But yeah. I gotta also, anybody who knows comic books has gotta appreciate your system that you have there. I don't know if that's your store and they're doing that on the pull requests, or it's you, but your comic book maintenance. And what I mean is that looks like plastic and board that's in there.
Oh yeah. Every single book,
done.
With the exception of maybe 2 books that I just forgot to buy a bag and board that day because I was in a hurry. Everything is in bags and boards down here. And Corey,
oh wow.
So Corey actually asked no, not that comment. He's asked how much are they worth, the comic books. I'm not actually, Corey, Tallboy. I don't actually, his name is Tallboy. Call him Tallboy. I don't actually know what value these will eventually have, but it's so funny because somebody asked me this the other day, oh, are you collecting them and keeping them in condition? I'm like, well, I keep them in good condition because I don't want them to get ruined, but I read, the moment I get them, I sit down and read them. I've actually read the High Republic ones a couple of different times because the stories that they tell really work well with the novelization stuff, which is kind of back here on my shelf. But yeah, I'm going to take care of them because I love them, and if my son ever wants to have them later on, if I take care of them, then he'll have access to them, or if other people I can show that to can get access to them at some point, and I can have some small part of this. You know, I've even picked up some books recently from a place called Half Price Books here in where I live, and some great Star Wars books that have, and you can tell that even though they're not in bags and boards, the books are in really good condition. Someone took really good care of them. So I'm getting bags and boards for them to make sure that these stories can live on. Like I like to give people space and like make sure to perpetuate the fandom in whatever small way that I can. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this. Like, I didn't know, and Jeff knows this from an early episode of the Kessel Chat. I didn't know Star Wars came in book form until I was like 9 years old and went to a garage sale, and someone had the Star Wars by George Lucas from the Adventures of Luke Skywalker, and it was the novelization of Star Wars. And I still have that book. It's right over here. I still have it with its original cover, and it's one of my like favorite things that I own. So I'm glad when people preserve things, whether they have value or not. I'm a big collector. I have my favorites are in bag and board, but then I have a lot. But I'm also a reader, so I've got a lot of things like my Vector series, a couple other comic books that I have, like the Aphra and all the Vader comics. All of those are outside of the bag and board because sometimes it's just like to pick those up and read them. So
absolutely,
yeah. Oh no, that's awesome.
Right on. Well, listen. This was a fantastic show. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. Tallboy, thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. Britton, thank you for being here. Rich, everybody, thanks for joining in. Really appreciate it. All about the book of Boba Fett show tonight. Next week, we're going to be talking a lot more about comic books. We have a guest coming on with us too, and we'll have some new format announcements at that point. But we will see y'all in about a week. It's gonna be fun.
Right on.
All right,
hey,
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night. See ya.
Bye, everybody. Good night.